Good evening or good morning, whatever the case may be. We're so happy you can join us today for the RELO AUA webinar. We are really excited to have Amy Maniot with us. She is a former English language fellow. She is recently finished up her fellowship in Mandalay, Myanmar, but she is planning to share with us today about Google Docs and how we can use that for collaborative writing in our classroom. We're really excited to hear from her about that. And please make sure that you put your chat box to all panelists and attendees so we can all see what's going on in the chat. And if you have any questions, make sure you either put them in the Q&A box, which might be the best place for them, but if not, then put them in the chat box so that we can take care of them along the way. It's easiest for the topic that if you give them to us as soon as you have them, then I can stop Amy, and if she needs to, she can go back and explain how something is done. We're really excited again, like I said, to have Amy with us. So take it away, Amy.
Good morning, everyone. It's morning where I am now in Cleveland, Ohio. And as Trisha said, I just completed a fellowship at Mandalay University in Mandalay, Myanmar. So hello if any of my colleagues from there were able to join us this evening there. So like Trisha said, we're going to be talking about collaborative writing today using a software program called Google Docs. And this will be a real basic introduction to get you as a teacher able to coach your students through using this software for collaborative writing projects. When we started working on this, we didn't know how many of us would be working remotely due to the COVID-19 virus, but now I think it's a really important tool for us to be able to work seamlessly with our students and have our students continue to work together even during this difficult time. So I'd like to start by asking how many of you have used Google Docs for any reason in the past and how familiar we are in general with it. So Trisha is going to put up a poll so we can gather some information from you. And we'd like to know if you have used Google Docs to share a document, to view a document, to collaborate with other writers, to edit a document, or if you've never used Google Docs before, which is completely fine. We'll get you up and running today.
Okay, and just know that you can mark that as many times as it applies to what you know. I'm glad you guys are all here. Can you see the poll? Because in our practice, we had problems with the poll. I don't see, oh, no, people are now participating. So excellent. Some people can't seem to see it. I'm not sure exactly what to do. Just the slides. I'm gonna end the poll and I'm gonna try doing it again. For some reason, okay. Something's going on. I'm gonna redo it, okay? Mm-hmm. Relaunch poll. Okay, so if you happen to vote before, try and do it again. Sorry about this, guys. I don't know if it's because now Zoom has become the way that people are communicating, so it has so much more usage. Yep, I think it's working this time. Excellent. I'm so happy about that. We're getting a lot more participants. And like I said, please make sure that you can mark as many things as apply. Excellent. I'm so glad the poll's working. I see that there. And it looks like, yes, we're having some great responses here, Amy. A lot of people have used it to share a document or view a document. Mm-hmm. And most people have actually used it before, but never fear if you haven't used it. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of these, today we'll be talking about a lot of different features of Google Docs. So anywhere that you are in this poll, everything from I don't even know what Google Docs is to I'm an expert user, I think there'll be something here for you today. And if you see something as we go through, if you are an expert user and you have some tips or suggestions, please include those in the comments as well so that other folks can see it and learn from your experience as well. Great.
Excellent. I'm just going to let this go for about 10 seconds more. But like Amy said, if you do have some tips, make sure that your chat box setting is set to all panelists and attendees. And that way all the attendees can see what you're saying as well. And that's helpful. Great. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now, guys, and then I'll share the results. Hopefully the sharing will work. We had some problems with that as well. But let's see. Amy, can you see the results of the poll there?
I cannot see the results of the poll. On my screen, it still appears to be the poll questions.
Okay, so we'll just give it a second. If not, then I'll just tell you what it is.
Okay.
So it looks like about 60% or 59% have shared the document before. 59% have also viewed a document that way. 45% have used it to collaborate with other writers, and 45% to edit a document, and about 14% have never used Google Docs. So we have some great opportunities to learn from this. And I have to say, I have used Google Docs for quite a few years, but I learned quite a bit the times that we've done practices. So I'm really excited.
Good. Yeah, great. Well, I'm really happy that everybody's here. And like I said, I hope that we have a good collaborative sharing experience today so that we can all share what our expertise is about this. And everyone can take something away that they can use in their next classes. So if you are new to Google Docs or you just need a quick review, Google Docs as a software program is a free web-based collaborative word processor. So it does not cost a teacher or a student any money at all to use it if you're using the Google Docs website. It is web-based, which means that your students will need an internet-connected computer or device to use it. It's collaborative, which means that many different people can use it across platforms. And it's a word processor, so it looks very similar to Microsoft Word or Pages in Macintosh platforms. So anyone can use it. If you've used another word processor, Google Docs will look really familiar to you. So we have quite an agenda this morning. And I just want to remind folks that this will also be available later on, so you can come back and take a look at it to review later, because we're going to talk quickly through all of these things. So first, I'm going to show you how to set up a shared Google document to share with your students. Then I'll show you how to invite the students to collaborate on that document. We'll do a quick review of how to type in the document and talk about some tricks and tips for typing. I'll show you the chat feature so that collaborators can use the software in order to communicate with each other about their collaboration. I'll show you the comment feature so that you as a teacher can give your students feedback on their writing as they're creating it. I'll show you how to edit their current work, so students or teachers can go in and edit what they're working on. And then finally, we'll talk about how you as the teacher can track your students' progress and collaboration through some of the tools so that you can grade your students fairly and have a really good idea of how the group worked together. So as I said, that's a really packed agenda. So I want to remind everyone that this webinar, and actually all of the webinars, are available on the RELO Bangkok YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and search for RELO, R-E-L-O, Bangkok, you'll see all of the webinars that we've ever done are available there for you to review. So if you forget something that I said today and you want to go back and check or just review the information, it's right there and you can do that anytime. So first, let's get started with getting your students set up with a Google user account. So in order for them to use Google Docs, they have to have a Google user account. It's best if they use a Gmail email address to set up their Google account, but it is possible for them to use a non-Gmail account in order to set up a Google user account. So all they have to do is go to Google and click create an account and then put in the information that they want to use here. If your students are confused about this or they've never worked with Google before, there is a video tutorial available through Google that will walk them through step by step how to do this step. But we're not going to talk about that today. I just wanted to point it out to you that there's more support available for your students if they need it. I also think it's a really good idea to ask your students to set up their account using some part of their real name or the name that you use with them in class. Sometimes students have cute little nicknames that they use for their Google user account, but that makes it really difficult for me as a teacher to know who has been collaborating on the document. So instead of 36 cute bunnies, ask your students to use something that includes their real name. So once everyone has a Google account set up, then we have to set up the document. So I'll show you how to access the Google Drive, how to create a new document, and then how to name the document so that it will save in the drive. I think it's a best practice for the teacher to be the one to create the document and then share it with the students. This means that the teacher will remain the owner of the document and you'll have full control of that document throughout the collaboration process. So here's how we will set up a document, how we'll create a document. So you can see that I'm logged in here because you can see my little picture in the circle in the top right. And this menu right next to it opens the Google Suite. And we're going to open the Google Drive application, this triangle, multicolored triangle here. And when it opens the drive, this is just like a file folder on your local computer. As you can see, mine is kind of messy because I use Google Docs a lot. But to create a new document, you just click here in the plus new and then select Google Docs. And this will open up a new word processing document. So you can see that this looks very similar to a word processing document in another program. And if you click in the top left here, as I'm doing, and save the document, give it a new title, something that you and your students will be able to recognize as the document you are collaborating on. So that's how you would create and name the document for your students. So it's all set up and ready for your students to be added to it. So next, I'm going to show you how to share with your students so that they have access to the same document you just created. So I'll show you how you'll share it by using their email address or their Google user email address, how to give them permission to edit or view the document, and then send them a notification so that they are ready to begin working on it. So when you're ready to share with students, you're going to click just on this little blue share button in the top right. You can see right now it's private only to me, and I'm ready to share it with other people. To share it, you need to use their Google user email address. You can share it with one person, you can share it with 20 different people. So you just keep adding email addresses until you have the whole group that you need to share it with. Different students can have different permissions. So you can see, and I'm gonna back up the video to show this again. So the little arrow here that says can edit, the little pencil, means that anyone who is given that permission will have permission to edit the document. There are two other permissions. You can give collaborators permission only to make comments or only to view the document. So that's entirely up to you. But if you want your students to be able to collaborate and work together and they're all going to provide content, you should give them permission to edit. That's the most permissive level of permissions you can give them. So that's what I recommend for most students. Next, you probably want to send them a little notification telling them that the document is ready for their collaboration. This eliminates some of the excuses where students may say, oh, I didn't know that you created the document, so I didn't log in and work on it. If you send them a little note using the share with others feature here, it will send them an email to their Google user email address that says, this is ready. This document has been created, you have been given permission, you're ready to start working on it. So this is a great way to just inform your students so that they know they can begin their work. Are there any questions so far about creating and sharing a document?
We don't have any questions so far, but if we do have some, I will be sure to let you know. I think this part, basically from our poll, it sounds like that this part is probably what most people know how to do. So the exciting part comes after this for all of us.
Yeah, great. I do want to remind folks that even if you are an expert user in this, your students may not have seen this before. So reminding yourself and going through the process yourself will also help you to be a better instructor as your students learn how to do this for the very first time.
Actually, Amy, there was one question that was just brought up. And the question is, what is the best way to collect the email address from students?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've used a lot of different ways. If I know that I'm going to be using Google Docs throughout a classroom, for example, if I'm teaching a writing class and I know I'm going to use Google Docs, I put it in my startup in the very first day. I have sometimes passed around a piece of paper that says, write your Google user address on here. In other contexts, I have access to their student emails. So if I'm using, for example, my university here uses Blackboard, and so I can send an email address to everyone through their student email address and request that they send me back their student user or their Google account username. So there's a variety of different ways that you can do it. It really depends on what your context is and how it's going to be most efficient for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right, let's move on to opening the file and getting your students collaborating. So here I'm going to show you how to go back and coach your students through finding the file, locating it so that they can share with it, and opening it up so they can get started. So they can just go to google.com, and we're going to reopen the drive by using the little menu next to our profile name. And when you open it up, there are two parts of the Google Drive that you may need to talk to your students about. In the My Drive are all of the documents that the user has created themselves. So as a teacher, this is where those documents will appear. For your students, however, because they did not create the document, it may be in the Shared with Me file. So it could be in the My Drive, if you're the creator of the document, or it could be in the Shared with Me file. Another way your students can find it quickly is to just search for it. I tend to just search for things because I know the name of it, and my Google Drive has a lot of documents in it. So once you find the file name, you click on it and it opens up the document. So I also want to just point out right up here in the top middle that Google Drive is saving automatically the changes that your students make. And I'll point this out again when we get to the typing part. So once your students are in the file, they're ready to begin collaborating and actually adding some content to this document. So I'll show you how they can identify who is in the document and actively using the document. We'll show you a demonstration of typing by each collaborator, looking at the different word processing features of the software, and then again, point out that Google is auto-saving each piece of collaboration that your students include. So you can see that we know who is active in the document by looking at the login screen up in the top left next to the share button, just to the left of the share button. Sorry, in the top right corner. So we can see that Trisha was logged in. She's the pink circle with the T in the middle. And we had another collaborator, Candace, helping us to create these videos. So you can see who's active in the document. This is great not only for your students to see who has arrived to the meeting and who is working in the document, but also you as a teacher, so you can keep tabs on which of your students are participating. As a user types, each thing is color-coded. So we can see right here that there's a little sort of teal flag, and that shows us that Candace is the one who's typing right now. In a moment, when a different collaborator begins to type, so you can see Trisha's little pink flag just popped up, that shows us that she's active in working in that part of the document. Now, I do want to point out that some people are a little bit self-conscious about having others see them type, because it's very normal when we're typing, even for me, to make mistakes while we're typing. We all make little typos. Some people type faster or slower than other people. And so I would advise you just to coach your students to understand that everyone feels nervous in the same way. It's not something that we need to be perfect at in the very first time that we try. I have had students say, I want to type when no one else is in the document because I'm afraid that they'll see me make mistakes. And I always tell my students, everyone makes mistakes. You don't need to feel self-conscious because everyone's having the same experience. So as people are typing, I also want to point out that Google is saving every change that's made. So right in the middle of the document, up at the top, it says see new changes. And if you keep your eye on that area, you'll see that every now and then it will change to saving new changes and then see new changes again. And this shows us that it's automatically saving the work your students are doing. I think this is a really important feature because I know we've all had the experience that students tell us that they completed their work and that they saved it, and then the dog ate their homework or they had some technical problem. So I think that Google really helps us eliminate some of those technical problems and also excuses about technical problems. Any questions about typing and creating content in the Google Doc?
Right now we don't. Let me see. There was a question, which might be interesting, about how we made these videos. That it says, how did you make the videos typing? Did you take the video of your screen while your collaborators were typing?
Yep, that's exactly what we did. So we created a little script and said, okay, Trisha, you're going to do this part, and Candace, you're going to do this part. And then I did a screen record of my screen while we were all working on the document. But this actually highlights how versatile Google Docs is, because when we created this document for the demonstration, I was working in Myanmar, Trisha was working in Thailand, and Candace was working in Indonesia. So we all found a time that we could meet together across 3 different countries, and we were able to create this document together. So it's a really powerful collaboration tool.
I think that, thank you, Amy, I'm so glad. That's one of the things what is fantastic about Google Docs, and why this was such an exciting topic for me, is thinking about the idea that how we were doing this, and we're even in different countries now. Even you're in the United States. I've worked with people that are in the United States, and so we're even in different time zones and you can still collaborate and do things like that. So it's a really powerful tool. Excellent, thank you. I think those are all the questions we have right now.
Great.
Okay.
All right, so next I'm going to show you a few tools that you may not have used, even if you have used Google Docs as for collaboration. And the next 2 tools, one is for students and one is for the teacher. And these kind of take a Google Docs, in my mind, to the next level and make this something that I think is a really useful tool for students and for teachers. So the first is the chat feature of Google Docs. So you can open a chat box and collaborators can talk with each other within the software program. So it provides easy collaboration. But my favorite part is that it keeps students on task because they're continuing to work in the same software program and not shifting to another one. It also keeps a record of your student meetings. So occasionally students will say, oh, we were working, but so-and-so didn't show up. You can go back in as a teacher and check and make sure that all students were participating. So I'll show you what this looks like. So when you open the chat feature, which is just up and to the right of each of the user profiles in the top right corner next to the share button, it opens a chat box, and I put the little red arrow to show you that it scrolls from the bottom up. So we add text there, and then it appears in the chat, which is saved, and we can review it at any time. Again, I think this is a great way to keep students on task because they're looking at the document and talking about the document or talking about their group work at the same time. Sometimes students have told me, oh, we're going to use Facebook Messenger to arrange our next meeting, or I'll text you later about when we're going to work on the document again. I think it's a great idea to encourage your students to use the chat feature for these functions of group work because you can see it as a teacher, but also they're not going to get lost. So if they have to switch over to Facebook Messenger to try to set up their next meeting, pretty soon they're probably going to get distracted by something else on Facebook, and then they're not working on the document. So using the chat feature keeps them in the software, on task, working together. And you can tell them that you'll be reading the transcripts of their chat so you can see how they were working together as a group. This also eliminates some of the uncertainty that students feel about their participation and if they're going to be graded fairly about their group work. You know, there's always a student that feels they did a little bit more than the other students did. And being able to review the chat is one way that we can help assure students that their work is going to be graded fairly. So as you can see in our chat, we were trying to figure out when would be the best time to chat next to work on the document. And we had to negotiate some tricky time zones. So, you know, like I said, we're working collaboratively across a couple of different time zones and using the chat feature to arrange our next meeting. All right. So next I want to show you what I think is part of the most exciting piece of Google Docs, and that's commenting and replying to comments. And the reason why I really love this is because it feels like I'm having a writing conference with my students. Hi, Trish.
Hello. I wanted to mention a question that I got in case people didn't see it and they were having the same problem. One person was asking about, they were currently trying to navigate looking at Google Docs and listening to the webinar so they could kind of be testing it out at the same time, but they didn't see the little flags like you had in your document. And so I just wanted to mention the answer that I had, and you can verify it or tell them if it's wrong, just so that everyone knows this, is that to get the flags, the person has to actively be working on it. You have to first share it with people and then actively be working on it together. Like if I open a document that even if I've shared it with Amy, but Amy isn't on it at the time, it won't show her flag. But if we're both on it at the same time, it will show it. Is that correct, Amy?
That's absolutely correct. And I backed up to that point in the slide so we can take a quick look at it. So right here, we can see that Trisha's little flag is visible, and that means that she is active and working in the document. So students can work at the same time in the document. They can even type at the same time, although that gets a little chaotic. But it only shows those little flags if the person is active. Students can also work on this in totally different times. So one student can log in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then a couple of hours later, when another student comes home from work, they can get on and look at it. And if they're working in the document at different times, they won't see these login icons up here. So if Trisha was not logged in and not active in the document, her little pink circle would not be shown up here and her little flag would not be available. So yeah, that's a great question. Thanks.
And there's one more that just came up. Is that it's about making comments when there are mistakes. And I think that you address that later on about how you can navigate when there's mistakes, like collaboratively. But I just wanted to highlight that there are some questions out there about that. So
great. Well, I think that comments is one of the ways that we can address that. So let's look at the comments feature, and then we can revisit that question in the context of the comments feature. So the comments and replying is what I'm going to show you next. And I just want to point out that both teachers and students can use the comment or reply feature. And this is a way, like I was saying, this is like a writing conference or a virtual writing conference because it's a place for us to discuss suggestions for improvement. So to point out if there are issues and make some suggestions or talk about how we want to make changes before we actually edit the document. So we have some content here, and we're going to take a look at how to how to make a comment to talk about how we may want to change this document. So in order to create a comment, you just highlight the area that you want to make the comment about, and this little plus sign will appear. And if you click on the plus sign, a dialog box will open where you can create a comment. So in this case, I'm saying, I think that our plural and singular forms might be mixed up here. So I create that comment, and I'm just making a note that I think this is something the students may want to address. And sometimes, so if I'm working in here as the teacher, sometimes I'll say, I think it should be this or this or this. But other times I'll say, please check grammar rules for past tense. And then the students are responsible for going and finding what the correct answer should be and then making the edit. I also want to point out that you have to click the comment link. I'm going to back it up just a moment so I can show you. So right here where it says I create the comment here, I type my idea, and then don't forget to click comment, because that's what saves the comment and makes it visible for the other collaborators in the document. So like I said, any person, so a teacher or other student, can comment about this, and it is like a mini writing conference. We can work at the same time, so I can be in there commenting at the same time that students are seeing my comments appear, or, and this is how I usually use it, I ask my students to create a first draft or create an outline, and then tell me when they're finished. And then after they give me a notification and say, okay, teacher, you can check our work, I go in and I look at it after they're finished. And I make all of my comments as if I'm, telling them in person. And then I send them a notification that says, okay, students, I've made my comments, please go in and edit your work. And so they can take a look at these and see what I thought, see what my suggestions are, and then have a group meeting to discuss amongst themselves how they want to make changes to address my comments. So as you can see, I created a comment, and then Trisha created a comment, and then Candace is going to create a comment in here. So this just shows that each collaborator is capable of both creating and also viewing the comments. So I think one of the ways that we can use comments, I love using it as a teacher because, like I said, it's like a virtual writing conference where I get to really share my ideas with my students and ask them questions. But I think this is also a really powerful tool for students to use with each other if you're doing peer review. So very often I have my students do a peer review before they submit a final draft, because we can talk for hours. We won't today, but we could talk for hours about the benefits of peer review. And Google Docs makes it really easy because a student can, with their own paper, share it with another group or another student and give them permission to comment only. And then that student can ask questions or just make some notes if they think something needs improvement. And then the group or student can respond to that in writing conference style. So after you've created your comments.
Amy, can I interrupt here? Something that we talked about when we had been going through this is about the names of the students and how we had gone back and forth that sometimes, like if there's the Google Suite that a school or a university has, and then so it's just their student numbers, right?
Yes.
But there's a way that you can go in and you can actually change the name that is visible. There's been some talking about have the students assigned numbers. There are different ways that you can maneuver the name that shows up, like how yours says Amy Maniot, that you can change that a little bit.
Right, absolutely. Yes. So one of the institutions where I've used Google Docs, students' email addresses are their student number. So it's just a string of 9 numbers that mean nothing to me. I use my students' names, not their numbers. And so what I advise them to do, if they want to use that email address to create their Google user account, there's a place in the Google user account where you are able to manually enter your first and last name that's associated with that account. So that's another best practice, that your students go and change that setting so that instead of it automatically using your student number as your first or last name, that they create it to use their first or last name somewhere in their username. Or somewhere in the software. So for example, you can see here that it's coming up as Amy Maniot, even though that's not my Google username. My Google username is a combination of my first and middle initials and my last name, but I told the software, so I hand entered that my first name was Amy and my last name was Maniot, And so that's what appears here when I'm commenting or chatting in Google Docs.
Excellent.
Hope that answers the question.
Well, and I suppose that you could even do the reverse if for whatever reason your students just had the Google, this Google account for your class. Instead of having the name, if you wanted them to have numbers, you could have them put in the number, like instead of it being Amy, you could just be 1 and I could be 25.
Sure. Yeah. If you're
well.
familiar with, using roster numbers and
Yes.
everyone's roster number instead of their name, sure, you could advise them to create that as part of their username also.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Keep the questions coming, everybody. I just want to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So next we're going to look at replying to a comment. So this is really where the discussion happens. So your students or you as a teacher, you create the comments, and then there's a reply feature. So you can really have a conversation about how you may want to edit the document. And so in order to reply to a comment, you just hover over the comment that you're thinking about, and a new text box will appear, and you can enter some new information into that text box and then click reply. This is a really great feature for me to use with my students if maybe I misunderstood what they were trying to write about. So sometimes I'll say to a student, it seems like you used the wrong verb tense here. And they'll write back and say, no, I really do want to use past tense because this happened to me as a child. And then I can write back and say, well, maybe you want to use past perfect tense if it happened before you started school. So it's a place where we can have a back and forth conversation about what our true intent was towards a specific section of the text. And students really like this because I'm not just in there, changing their words. We're really having a conversation about what their meaning is, what grammar they're using to express their meaning. We talk a lot about vocabulary in this kind of conversation to make sure that they're getting the best word to convey the idea that they want to. So next we're going to talk about actually editing and then resolving those comments. So students can edit the text directly, and actually you as a teacher could edit their text directly if you wanted to. So how to edit the text directly, how to resolve those comments so that they go away, and then again we're going to look at the autosave feature. So to edit directly in the document, it's really simple, just like a regular word processor. You highlight the section that you want to edit and then make the change. So we can see who's making each edit because their little flag will appear in the text. So we can see right now that's me making a change. And we can also see up here, it says all changes saved in Drive. So each time that a change is made, Google is automatically saving it. So you can see I just resolved a comment also. So once we make an edit, so Trisha's going to make an edit right here. So she says, okay, yeah, I see deer, antelope, and elk should be in their singular form. Singular and plural are the same. And then she went over and resolved the comment. So we don't need to look at that anymore. Now, I will remind folks that Google is saving all of these comments. So if there's ever a question later on about why we made a certain change, those are always available for us to go back and review the conversation we had about that particular change. And I'll show you that at the end so you can see how to review each of those comments. So while we're here and we're looking at editing, I want to point out a few of the word processing features available in Google Docs. So like I said, it is auto-saving. So we can see for each change that we make right up here where it says see new changes, that'll occasionally change to saving new changes. So Trisha's just doing some cleanup work here. She's changing a couple of spelling typos that we had while we were typing. Then Candace is changing a couple of things here, changing a vocabulary word. So you can see we're each working in here at the same time. And wherever our cursor is, that's where our little flag is going to be. If you're not working at the same time, if you're working in different times, Google Docs is still saving a record of who is making each change. And I'll show you that next. So Trisha's doing some cleanup. She just changed the font of part of it. And all of the features that are available in other word processing documents like Microsoft Word or Pages are available here. So all of those formatting things like indentation, having the correct font size and an appropriate font style, having things double spaced, all of those things are available here. So we can make our paragraphs look like true academic paragraphs using any type of formatting that you like. So she's going to make it double spaced, and then voila, we have a nice looking academic paragraph. So as I mentioned, when we are doing all of these edits, Google is keeping a record of all of the work that's being done by our students. It's a fantastic tool for teachers to make sure that we're grading our students fairly according to their contributions to the project. So I'll show you next how you can view the comment history, how you can see who did each change, and then a full history of the document so that you can review students' participation and contributions. So in order to see who created what, we can first look at the comment history. So this little button right up here shows the comment history. And we can see then the conversation that students had or the conversation you had with students about each change you decided to make in the document. So it keeps a record of all of this, of who suggested what. And then the other thing that it's always doing is it's saving those changes so we can see what's what. So if you go to see new changes, it'll show you the most recent changes, and it's all color coded according to who created which content. So if I remember correctly, Trisha is in the purple and Candace was in the orange and my part was the green. So if you hover over each, if you're not sure, their little flag will show up. So that will say, okay, Trisha created this content, Candace created this content. So we can see, even by color code, which students created which content and in which areas. And this helps us to be a more fair grader to see, did everyone create equal amounts of content, or was one student really dominant and another student did not contribute very much at all? So we can also page through each of the edits over here in the edits. So we can look at each edit individually. So edit 10 of 17, 11 of 17, and it will highlight it in the document so you can see who created that edit.
Hey, Amy, if I can just interject for a second, we do have a question coming up, and I think at this point, it actually is a little bit topical as you're showing us, it shows us who made the edits and who put it in. Now, what if and this harkens also back to the peer review section a bit, but if you have one student that is always trying to comment on their co-collaborators' work, and how do you deal with that if it's too much, or how have you navigated that in the past?
Yeah, I mean, the dynamics of group work are really difficult for students to navigate and also for teachers to assist students in navigating. So I usually set up some ground rules about how my students are going to work together. So that may be something like each student is required to comment on 3 items, but not more than 5. So give them some kind of a limit of saying, all right, we're going to make comments, but you can't just go in and say everything is wrong and everything needs to be changed. So maybe giving them a range of how many things they can comment on. Another rule that I usually set up for my students is that you can change your own text, but you cannot change another student's text without their permission. And this unfortunately came out of experience. I had one student who one night went in right before the final paper was due and made a bunch of edits. Unfortunately, they were not correct edits. So when the students went in the morning to submit the document, everything was incorrect. There were a lot more mistakes than there were the day before. Luckily, however, because Google is keeping a record of those edits, they could go back and undo those incorrect edits very easily. So it was really easy for me to see this one student went in, messed a bunch of stuff up, and then the rest of the group went in and made those corrections. So yeah, setting some ground rules for your students about how they interact, and then also having a record of things so that if students do come to you and say, so-and-so in our group is really not working out, you can have evidence that the student has not been being a productive or collaborative group member, and you can grade them accordingly.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Amy.
Again, we could talk all day about group work dynamics.
Yes, that is true. And experiences we have with them. So, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so we showed tracking students' work, and I just wanted to show one last thing here at the end of the video. And that is that you can see the full history. So you can always go back in time and see, what did students create on the very first day? What did students create on the second day, the third day? And look at every single change that they made along the way. So not only can you see who did the most recent edit or the most recent change, but you can look back at the full history to make sure that you as a teacher are grading fairly everyone's collaboration on the work. So we're just about done here. Those are the main features of Google that I wanted to show you today. There are just a couple of drawbacks, and maybe our audience will think of a few more since we have experienced users. The drawbacks that I considered are, one is that it does require an internet connection. So if you have students that do not have a reliable internet connection at home, it may be more difficult for them to use this software. However, the workaround for this is that it can be used from an internet-connected smartphone. I've had lots of students who don't have a computer use their phones to create entire projects using Google Docs. And for me, maybe because I'm a little older, it's hard for me to use my thumbs to type an entire document, but some of my younger students have no problem at all using their smartphone to connect and use Google Docs efficiently. The second drawback is privacy. I always remind my students at the beginning of a project that Google is a public company and this information is being saved to the cloud. So that means it's out there on the internet, and once things are on the internet, they're out there forever. So this information should be, students should not share sensitive information or very personal information while they're using Google Docs. I use it mostly for academic writing, writing different types of paragraphs or research projects. If I ask my students to write something extremely personal, like a journal or letters to each other or something like that, I would probably choose a different software or a different medium for them to do that kind of sensitive or personal work. I wonder if anyone else has any other drawbacks that we should discuss about using Google Docs.
Let me see, we do have one question here. So there's a question about the level or the age of students. What has been your experience with that?
So in my experience, I've mostly used this with university level students. But I think it can be used for other levels of students as well, as long as your students are old enough that they know how to type and sort of like those basic word processing skills. So if your students have basic word processing skills like typing and using a mouse, I think they can be coached to use Google Docs.
Okay, yeah, and I would say I totally agree with that. I've seen students that, definitely in, secondary school can use it, because even, like you say, even if they don't type like on a type, they can do with their thumbs. They can figure it out. We do have a few questions. Do you know anything about the plagiarism detection feature on Google Docs?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know about that. I'm not sure if there is one, or I have not used it before. But if someone has information about that, I would love to see a link or a tutorial about that, because it is a real concern. I know also in the practice session, one of the other panelists brought up, how do you know that it's really your student typing in there because you can't see them? And my first answer is, well, how do we know that it's our student, writing on a piece of paper at home when we give them homework? And so, that is something that's a concern, but they do have to be logged into their secure Google user account in order to use it. We, of course, can't prevent them from, logging into their account and then, calling someone over to sit down in front of their computer to do their work. But that's the same as with, writing on a piece of paper for homework. That's the same thing. I think that the way to address that is actually through open conversation with our students about what our expectation is for their learning process, and that writing is a process, not a product, and that we expect them to make mistakes. We expect them not to have a perfect product the very first time they sit down. And so usually when my students understand that I'm looking for their progress through the writing process, it eliminates that pressure to create something perfect the first time and maybe bring in a friend to give them some help.
That's a really good point. And I do know that there are programs out there that do detect plagiarism.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I'm completely blanking on the one that I've seen used a lot, so I can't even direct people that.
I
so
turn it in, and there's a couple of other ones as well.
Turn it in. That's right. So apparently Grammarly has a free plagiarism search feature as well. Now there was one, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, I have seen Grammarly before. I've used that in a very limited capacity before as well. Yeah.
Yes. So there is one question. With a class of 20, sometimes I will create groups and share a doc with each group. Any tips on this? So if you're sharing it, like if you have a larger class and then you're dividing it up and you have a doc for each group, dividing them up into, say into creating the groups, do you have any tips for that? And then maybe like how you navigate that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, dividing students into groups, there's a bunch of different ways that we can accomplish that, especially with writing. One of the ways that I like to arrange groups, so here in the United States, my classes are comprised of students who do not all speak the same native language. So I really like to put students into groups with people who do not speak the same language as they do. So I'll just look at my class and say, all right, I need an Arabic speaker and a Spanish speaker and a Chinese speaker and a Vietnamese speaker. You guys are a group. That ensures that they have to use English as their medium of communication. So that's one way that I like to put groups together. That's not always available or practical, especially if you are working in a context where your students all speak the same language. So another way that I've put groups together is I start by having them all do an individual brainstorm on a topic. So if we're writing a descriptive paragraph or something like that, I'll have them all brainstorm first, and then we'll find some common interests. So if, 3 or 4 students in their descriptive brainstorm were talking about maybe the natural area around our university. Maybe one was talking about trees, maybe one was talking about a courtyard area, maybe one was talking about the animals that they saw on campus. I might put those students together because they have a common interest.
Yeah, trying to decide how to divide students into groups can be challenging, and it's so dependent on who's in your class, what your goal is for the assignment, all sorts of different things. There is one more question here. It says, are there any limitations for particular group members? I'm not exactly sure what that question means, but I think it may be trying to say that in Google Docs, are there limitations to what group members can do? I think that's what they're trying to ask.
Sure. Yeah, if that's the question, I would answer it by saying that you as the creator of the document can set up different permissions for students. So if you want all of your students to collaborate on the same document, they should all have permission to edit that document. However, if you want just to do peer review, you should ask the students, either you if you created the document, or if they are going to share it with the peer reviewer, they can give them only permission to edit. And that's usually, I use the edit, or sorry, I misspoke, I apologize, comment. For peer editing, you should give only permission to comment, because then they can ask questions or make suggestions, but they cannot actually change the text of the document.
Okay, excellent. I think we don't have any more questions right now. So if you do have some questions, make sure you put them up here as soon as possible so I can get those out. But
so I also just want to remind people that if they do have a question later on and they want to review something, that this webinar, as well as all of the other webinars done by the RELO Bangkok office, are available on the YouTube channel. So YouTube, and then search RELO Bangkok, and you can review this webinar and go through the content again if you just need to review, or even to direct your students to take a look at it to make sure that they understand how to use the software as well.
Excellent. There is one more question, but before I get to that question, I would like to say that, so as Amy mentioned, on the YouTube channel for RELO Bangkok, all of the webinars that we have done this year are up there. And so a lot of them, there was such great material, but I could see that it would be overwhelming to do it. So it is a thing that you can check out and watch it at your leisure, and it will stay up there. So this is the question: what should be the appropriate amount of students collaboratively writing on one Google Doc? So what would you say would be the number of students together per document?
Yeah, I would say probably about 5 or 7 would be a maximum. 7 would be a pretty large group to be trying to create content. It depends how large the assignment is. Also, you know, a very large assignment might require a few more collaborators to create all of the content. But I would say 5 would be pretty good. 7 would be about as large as I would recommend.
And then perhaps for a smaller assignment, even as small as 3, or I guess you could even do pairs, depending on how big your class is as well, too, I'm sure. Okay, there's one more question here. How can you adapt blind and double blind editing for writing on Google Docs?
Oh, great question, and I do not have an answer. I think that using Google Docs requires each user to log in with an identifiable username. So you would always be able to see who is editing or commenting on your document. Yeah, so I don't think that there is an option for blind or double blind commenting or editing.
Excellent. Okay, I think that's all our questions right now that we have. So
great. So I'll give a plug for you, Trisha. So next month, Trisha is going to be doing the webinar on reading out loud, ideas for using oral reading in an English language classroom. So I'm really excited about that. I'll probably tune in from the US to listen to her ideas. So that's on May 7th. Which again is a Thursday at 6 p.m. Bangkok time. So for me here in Cleveland, Ohio, that'll be a bright and early 7 a.m. So make sure you check your local time so that you can log in and not miss any of her webinar.
I am so excited to be able to do this next time. I've been facilitating these webinars this whole year, and I decided it was about time that I did one. So I decided that I would do it, and we're going to have someone else. We're going to have Katie Wood be my facilitator or the host. So I hope you all can make it. And we are so thankful to Amy, how much work she put into this webinar and all the great questions that she answered and the questions that you guys had. That was very helpful to have all those questions. So great job, Amy. And we will see you next month. And I will be in the different position of being the presenter rather than the host. So I will see you next month. And thank you very much, Amy, again. And have a great night, everyone, or a great day if you're in Cleveland, Ohio.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.